Jim, if you can you connect?
Yes, can you hear me?
Jim, can I get another mic check?
Yes, hello, can you hear me?
We can, Jim, welcome.
Oh, hi.
Aaron, can you share your screen, please?
Yes, just give me 1 minute here.
We should have commercials that we could put on. Town center commercial. Mm, yeah. Just have it ready so that, you know, when there's a blank moment, you can run it.
How's that, Alan? Can you see that?
Yep, we're good to go.
Would you like me to do the presentation now? Oh.
So Jim, go whenever you're ready. We're ready to listen.
I'm sorry, I was just waiting. Okay, yeah, thanks for the opportunity to present the findings and recommendations of the permit review. So if you go to the next slide, Aaron. So the last, just by way of background, the last comprehensive building permit user fee review was undertaken in 2005, approximately 16 years ago. And then since that time, CPI is, although the fees have remained the same, CPI has increased by about 30%. In addition to the increase in CPI, there was a new building code enacted in 2014, which increased the complexity of plans review and inspections, hence the need for a new study. So the purpose of this study is to update the fees and to ensure that the fees are fair, reasonable, and proportionate to the cost of service. So if you go to the next slide right after this, Aaron, in terms of the guiding principles on the next. So these are the guiding principles that we used in the determination of the fees. First of all, the first guiding principle being fairness and equity. We want to ensure that the fees are equitably distributed between the various types of applications. And then secondly, that the fees will be set to recover 100% of the full cost of service. And how we define full cost of service is all of the direct and indirect costs of providing the service. And this is in accordance with the Building Code Act, which stipulates that fees not exceed the anticipated cost to administer and enforce the building code. So we're doing it in accordance with the Act and ensuring that the fees not exceed the anticipated cost. The second guiding principle being transparency. We want to ensure that the cost of service and pricing structure is transparent to all the applicants. And then in terms of predictability, applicants want to know and have certainty of fees to allow them to make more informed decisions. So if there's any phase-in strategies that may be employed, this would provide this information to applicants so they can base their decisions. So if we go to the next slide, in terms of the review process, the first step in the process was to have interviews with all of the staff in the building department. And the purpose of this was to review all of the work that is involved in administering the building code, and also an opportunity for them to provide to us some of the challenges and opportunities they see in the user fees and user fee structure. And then the next step in the process was to do process mapping. And what that entailed is that the staff for each application type provided the time estimate to undertake each of the activities in providing the service for each application type. And these estimates, again, were provided by this time estimates were provided by staff. And then the next step in the process was to estimate the productive hours or available hours. And available hours, what it does, it takes into account things like vacations, statutory holidays, sick time, etc. And the reason for that, it's used to determine the actual hourly rate of the employees when we calculate the fees. And then the next step is to do the fee calculation. And as I say, the fee calculation is based on 100% of the cost of service, which includes all of the direct costs and indirect costs. And then finally, what we did is we did a comparison of the fees with the surrounding municipalities. And the purpose of this is to ensure that the fees continue, first of all, continue to be competitive. And then secondly, it's a further test for reasonableness of the fee calculations. So we get into the next slide after this, Eric. This is a review of the revenues and expenditures. So we looked at the cost of service. And you can see from this chart here that the 2021 approved budget was approximately 367,000. And then we, on the, based on further discussions with staff, what we identified was that there was some additional overhead support that was provided by the building department that wasn't taken into account. And then there was some additional vehicle expenses. So by incorporating those additional indirect costs, the actual budget, which we calculated to be, and again, this is based on discussions with finance staff, 386,000. So that is the amount that should be collected from fees to provide a break-even analysis. So if we go to the next slide, this is the historical building permit revenues shown on a graph. And you can see a couple of things from this. First of all, in 2020, it was a significant year in terms of residential construction. And residential homes account for about 60% of the total construction value and fees. And you can see that in 2020, your permit fees were quite high. But the other thing too that this graph shows is that there's tremendous volatility associated with fees. You can see an upturn between 2015 and 2017, but then from 17 to 19, there was a downturn in economic activity. So the economic activity is pretty volatile. So what, as a result of the volatility of the permit fee revenues, the best practice or leading practice is to have a building stabilization reserve. And in fact, Thames Center does have a building stabilization reserve. And this is used to smooth rates over economic downturns. If we go to the next slide, further information on the building permit stabilization reserves. As I said, it spreads the impact of market fluctuations across an economic cycle. It avoids the fluctuation in fees and provides that rate predictability that we talked about earlier. The last thing you want to see is that in an economic downturn, just to meet the expenditures, you're increasing fees. So through the use of the reserve, you're able to smooth the revenues. They're also available for one-time capital expenditures. And again, it provides some consistency in the budget that any one-time capital expenditures you don't have to include, and you can meet the revenue from the reserve. And generally what municipalities have done in terms of leading practice on stabilization reserves is they set a target range anywhere between 100 and 200% of operating costs. And we look at Thames Center building permit stabilization reserve. Your current reserve balance represents about 178% of the operating costs. So it is quite healthy. And as a result of that, this provides some flexibility in setting fees, which I'll talk about in a few minutes. But what we do recommend is that, and again, in accordance with the leading practices, that you set a minimum reserve target of the building permit stabilization reserve to 100% of operating costs. So the forecast, what we did is prepared a forecast based on your existing fees. And as I said, your fees haven't increased in a number of years. So if you look at this forecast, the revenues are forecast based on the growth forecast that was provided in the development charge background study. Shows revenues at approximately about $279,800. And your expenditures, they're going to be increasing over the next 5 years. And what we anticipated is starting with that base budget that we just looked at in 2021. In 2022, we anticipated 2% inflation factor, and then thereafter, an additional 2% inflation factor in the expenditures. So as a result of that, looking at the growth forecast and the anticipated expenditures and no increase in revenues, you can see from this chart that there's going to be a deficit commencing in 2022 of about 114,000, and that increases each year to 2026 to about 140, almost 147,000. So this reflects the need to revisit the fees and ensure better alignment of the revenues and expenditures. So if we go to the next chart, this is this is showing the building stabilization reserve that I talked about a few minutes ago, and it shows the forecast based on that growth forecast that we just looked at. So as I say, you're in a pretty healthy position in 2021. You can see from this graph. But by 2023, if there's no fee increase and in the growth forecasts translates into reality and your expenditures be increasing by 2%, by 2023, your reserve balance would be down to about $400,000. And then by 2026, you'd actually be in a, if it continued, you'd be in a negative position. So go to the next slide. So if in terms of the recommended fees, as I said, they haven't increased since 2020 or 2005. And therefore, the new calculated fees result in some of the applications, some fairly significant increases. So it's recommended that the increases be phased in over a period of 3 years. And because you have the existing fairly healthy reserve balance, and that provides this flexibility that you can phase it in, it's going to be drawing down the reserve, but by phasing in the increases, it won't be drawn down dramatically. I'll show you that in a few minutes. There are a couple instances where the actual calculation of the fees have decreased in terms of agricultural building permit fees. And what we recommend on that there be no phase-in strategy, that if there's a decrease, the decreased fee would be immediately incorporated. Then as a result of going through the process and talking to the staff, there are some services that staff have identified that currently there's no fee for. And so we established new fees for things like roof-mounted solar panels, the transfer of a permit, plans re-examination due to material change in the application, and then finally a re-inspection fee on the third inspection as a result of the premature or infraction identified at a previous inspection. And this also creates efficiencies, so it's an incentive that the builder is ready for the inspection and tries to avoid as much as possible any infractions. So if we go to the next slide. So as a result of the recommendations in terms of the fees and the phase-in strategy, This would be the impact on a 1,900 square foot residential unit. You can see the existing fees, assuming no increase in the existing fees would be it's currently about $1,400. The proposed fees starting in 2022 would be $1,653. And then with a 2% inflation factor on the fees, that would increase to about 1,900 in 2023 and then 2128 in 2024. So that's the end of the 3-year phase-in strategy. So in 2022, the impact on a house would be $253, fairly insignificant in terms of the cost of the total cost of the house. In 2023, that would increase to about $519. In 2024, $728. So if you go to the next slide, I showed you previously if there was no fee increase, what would happen in terms of the budget deficit. So based on the fee recommendations, and again, this is employing a 3-year strategy, a phase-in strategy. The expenditures, you can see they increasing 2% a year, and then the revenues, revenues would be increasing as a result of the 3-year phase-in. So in the first year, there would still be a drawdown in the reserve of about $77,800. But by the end of the phase-in year period, it's almost equal. It shows about an $18,000 deficit, which is fairly insignificant. And then if you look at the bottom of the graph, the operating forecast, as I just illustrated, is the revenues almost meet the expenditures by the end of at the end of the 5 years. So the next slide. So this would be the impact on the building stabilization reserve fund. As I showed you previously, with no fee increase, by 2026, it would be in a deficit balance. By employing the 3-year phase-in strategy and increasing the fees every year over the next 3 years, you can see that by the end of 2026, you'd still have a positive balance. And it's at the recommended minimum target of 100% of the expenditures. So again, you want to ensure that you have a reserve balance to meet those economic downturns that potentially could occur. So the next step in the process, if we go to the next slide after that, what we did is we did the review with the surrounding municipalities. And I'll just fairly quickly go through this. So in terms of the residential construction, again, using a 1,900 square foot house, your existing fees are much lower than all of the comparator municipalities. And then when you look at the proposed fee in the green, you're actually below the average, but about at the median of the fees in comparison to the other municipalities. So if we go to the next page, this is a mercantile property, 5,000 square foot. Again, you're much lower than the other municipalities. And at the end of the 3-year phase-in period, you'll be about at the median. And then the next slide is the industrial construction. Again, you're lower, you're the second lowest in this instance. And then the proposed industrial, this is for a 10,000 square foot industrial complex. You'd be below the average in the median. Agricultural building permits, as I mentioned previously, this is an area where the fee is actually decreased. So if you look at your existing fee, you're second highest in the survey, and then the proposed fee would bring you just above the average and the median. So there would be a decrease in that category. And then finally, the septic permit comparison. Again, you're the lowest. And then by the end of the 3-year phase-in period, you'd be about at the median. So if you go to the next slide, the summary of recommendations. We're recommending you update the fees and fee structures as set out in the report based on a 3-year phase-in strategy. We're also recommending on number 2, building permit fees be updated annually through an indexing provision, effective January 1st of each year. And then recommendation 3 is we're recommending that you do a comprehensive building permit user fee review every 5 years. Keep it fairly active. And then finally, establish a minimum target for the building permit stabilization reserve at 100% of the operating expenditures. And that is the end of the presentation, and be happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Thank you, Jim. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Okay, I just want to thank you for the report. I did comment to council before we started our meeting that I thought that was a very well written and very clear and concise report. So we appreciate getting
Thank you.
something like that in front of us. I think Thames Center is in the same position as a lot of businesses where you're a victim of your own success, where you're working along and you're chugging along and you're doing all this stuff, and every now and then you have to stop and take a look and see what you're doing. And this is one of those circumstances. And as I said, I'm ashamed it's a bit since 2005, but it's great to have that update now. So thank you.
Welcome.
Council, do you have any questions regarding this report? No, I don't see any questions. So it must have been a really good report when you don't have any questions. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye now.
Bye. Aaron, are you ready to give your report now?
I am. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you.
Okay, so in front of council there is report BD 00821, and this report basically summarizes what Jim went through. So I don't need to really go over it too much more. I want to save your time. But further to that, I have not received any questions or concerns from any members of the public or any stakeholders in the industry. So I'll put it back to council here, and if you guys have any questions for me.
Thank you. Council, do we have any questions for Aaron regarding this report?
No, Your Worship.
Wish I could, there we go. You'll see that there is quite a few motions here that report BD 00821 be received as information, and that the recommended fee structure set out in the BMA Building Services fee study be approved and implemented based on the 3-year phase-in beginning January 1st, 2022. That the annual update to building permit fees through an indexing provision effective January 1st of each year based on the percentage increase of the Consumer Price Index, CPI, as of September 30th of the previous year be approved, and that during the phase-in period, the recommended 2023 rates would be increased based on the 2022 increase in CPI, and the 2024 rates would be increased based on 2022 and 2023 CPI increase, and that the comprehensive building permit user fee study be conducted every 5 years, and that a minimum target for the building permit stabilization reserve be established at 100% of the operating expenditures, and that council directs staff to amend and update the existing building bylaw and consolidate the new proposal building permit fees with the fees and charges bylaw to take effect on January 1st, 2022. So council, all in favor? Oh. Yep, thank you. All in favor? Seconder, okay, boy, it's been a long time since we've had a meeting. So seconder, Councillor Hunter, thank you. And now, all in favor? Great, thank you, and so carried. Thanks for the report, Aaron.
Thank you, council.
And now I have a motion that the building public meeting be adjourned in order to sit as a committee of adjustment under the Planning Act. Mover, Councillor Hunter, seconded Deputy Mayor Elliott, all in favor? Great. Now we have the minor variance application, A1421, which would be 2429926 Ontario Incorporated, the applicant being Zelinka Priamo, in care of Casey Kolchicki, and the address would being 4170 Catherine Street. Head, Mr. Bancroft.
Thank you, and good afternoon, Council. So the purpose and effect application is to seek relief from the zoning bylaw. I'm not sure whether it's feedback.
What's wrong?
It seems to be a bit of feedback with the audio. But anyway, I will press on. So this minor variance, it seeks a relief from two standards in the zoning bylaw. One is to allow for an increase in the number of permitted accessory dwelling units. And the second reason for relief from the zoning bylaw to allow for a reduction in the required parking obligation. So just for some background, the subject property, it's about 1/3 of an acre in size, and it's located on the north side of Catherine Street and east of Charles Street. They're located in the commercial core of the village of Dorchester on the north side of the river. These lands are designated general commercial core area, and also they're zoned for commercial purposes, the GC1 category. This property, it contains a 2-story building with a shared driveway with parking located at the rear. And the building is serviced by municipal water, along with a private sewage disposal system. The applicant, they are proposing to renovate the existing building into an office use on the ground level and 2 accessory dwelling units on the upper level, with a total of 6 on-site parking spaces, whereas the zoning bylaw limits the number of accessory dwelling units to a maximum of 1 and requires 9 on-site parking spaces. So although the existing parking area at the rear is not paved, the applicant's agent has noted that 6 parking spaces could be accommodated without disturbing existing vegetation. I've conducted my analysis, Your Worship, following the evaluation criteria under the Planning Act, and I'm satisfied that the 4 tests under the legislation have been met. In terms of circulation comments received from agencies, from the county engineer, he's noted that reliance of on-street parking on a long-term basis may be impacted by future cycling infrastructure controls that may be implemented as part of the county's cycling strategy. We also have comments that were received subsequent to the preparation of my report from the Upper Thames River Conservation Authority. They have no objection. From CN Rail, they've provided some comments considering the railway line backs onto the subject property. They note CN encourages the municipality to pursue the implementation of the following criteria. 1, that the owner be required to install and maintain a chain link fence of at least 6 feet in height along the mutual property line at the rear of the property. And secondly, that a standard noise warning clause should be inserted in all development agreements, offers to purchase and sale, or lease of each dwelling unit within 300 meters of the railway right-of-way. In terms of a staff response to CN's request, I did undertake a site inspection, which revealed that there really is no fencing at the rear of the property other than a dilapidated page wire fence. And the required to upgrade fencing would be appropriate as a condition of this approval. Secondly, considering there's no requirement for the applicant to enter into a development agreement with the municipality, given the nature of the proposed development, there's no mechanism that would require a noise warning clause to be registered on title. But at the same time, it is suggested and recommended that the applicant include such warning clause in any future purchase and sale and or lease agreements associated with the property. From the drainage superintendent, he has no comment. From our chief building official, he's noted that the property is serviced by a septic system, and the municipality has no record regarding the size of the tank. And with the proposed renovations to the building, the on-site system will need to be assessed to confirm its size and adequacy to accommodate the proposed development. He also notes that building permits will be required for the renovation of the space. And then lastly, from our Director of Public Works, he's indicated that the existing water service is extremely dated, dating back to the 1950s, and undersized. And as a result of the proposed redevelopment, upgrades to the water service are warranted. So he's made a request, as noted in my report, subject to obtaining the necessary permits, that the existing service be upgraded to a 1-inch standard, including a curb stop and meter valve. Also, that a backflow preventer be installed. And lastly, that the driveway that would be subject to construction based on the water service upgrade, that area be restored to the satisfaction of the municipality. In terms of circulation comments received in the circulation of the application to the public, I did receive one email from a Christopher Morello. Mr. Morello noted that he did support the change in terms of increasing the number of accessory dwelling units from 1 to 2. However, he did have some concerns about allowing for a reduction in the on-site parking standard, going from 9 spaces to 6 spaces. In particular, if there were bike lanes installed along Catherine Street, whether or not this would create a parking dilemma. I should note that I did do some research in response to that concern, Your Worship, and overall there could be a reduction in on-street parking near or at intersecting streets in the commercial core, but it's not as if there would be a prohibition on street parking along Catherine Street, only a reduction in certain areas. So it's my recommendation, Your Worship, that this variance application be approved, subject to the 2 conditions that are noted in my report. One, dealing with the installation of a chain link fence along the rear, as requested by CN. And then secondly, that the water service be improved, upgraded, and also subject to the reasons outlined in my report. That is my presentation for this application, Your Worship. If there's any questions, I'm here to answer those. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so do we have the agent available, Alan?
Yes, Your Worship. Casey Kulichek.
Okay, thank you.
My apology, Kulchecki.
Good afternoon, members of council. My name is Casey Golchicki, and I am the planner representing the applicant on the minor variances that Mark just presented on. I have nothing to. I'll just add a little bit, I guess, to Mark's presentation. We've read the report, and we are in agreement with the recommendation and the conditions that have been imposed. And we acknowledge building permits are required, and there may be some additional works with regards to the septic system and upgrading that as part of the building permit process. And we will undertake that inspection during the building permit process. The only comment that I would expand on is, as Mark noted, the request for the reduction is parking is based on the conversation with the proposed office user. They are expecting to only require 2 to 3 parking spaces for their day-to-day operations. And the residential parking rate is 1.5 units per dwelling unit, which the remaining 3 parking spaces would cover. There is adequate area on the subject lands to expand the parking area if and when demand were to ever increase. The present approach is, given that the current demand doesn't warrant additional parking, we didn't want to unnecessarily remove mature trees and vegetation that are towards the rear of the property at this time. But given the depth of this lot, there is ample space in the rear to expand parking if and when future demands require it. Other than that, I'm available to answer any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kulczycki. Councillor, any questions regarding this application? Nope, seeing none. Are there any members from the public in attendance who wish to provide comments?
No, Your Worship.
Any committee members have any questions regarding the application? Nope, seeing none. So I'm going to ask the committee to make their decision on the application by resolution. Councillor Hunter, seconded by Deputy Mayor Elliott. All in favor? Thank you. Now, a written notice of the decision will be forwarded to designated parties, and there's a 20-day appeal period. You may request to be notified of the decision by emailing the clerk. All right. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Kulczycki. Bye now. Moving on to now a public hearing for a minor variance application, number A15/21. The purpose of this hearing is to consider an application for minor variance as submitted by the applicant, John and Teresa Vanderhoven. The property location is 2588 Catherine Street, and I'm going to ask our planning director, Mr. Bancroft, to provide an overview of the application.
Thank you, Your Worship. So this variance request is for relief from the zoning bylaw to allow the construction of an addition to an existing detached accessory building, which would exceed the maximum floor area requirement. The subject property, it is 0.84 acres in size. It's a residential lot located on the north side of Catherine Street and west of Westchester Bourne in the hamlet of Wabano. This property contains a single detached dwelling serviced by a private well and septic system, along with a detached garage and a pool cabana. The applicant, they are seeking permission to construct a 350 square meter, so that's 3,773 square foot addition to an existing 111 square meter or 1,200 square foot detached garage. That would be a total floor area of 461.5 square meters, which is just under 5,000 square feet. According to the applicant, the addition is being requested to allow for personal storage purposes, including several cars, yard maintenance equipment, outdoor furniture, and miscellaneous garage wares. That's the existing detached garage. It is located in the rear yard along the west side of the property. Subsequent to the circulation of this application, Your Worship, the applicant has amended their proposal to a reduced addition of 140 square meters, which is 1,500 square feet, for a total floor area of 251 square meters, which is 3,700 square feet. This significant reduction was brought forward by the applicant in response to staff expressing concerns about the size of the proposed addition. I've also, I should add that the lands are designated hamlet under the official plan, and they're also zoned hamlet residential. I've conducted my analysis, Your Worship, and I'm satisfied that the 4 tests under the Planning Act have been met. And that is in particular considering that with the surrounding area, There are already a number of large existing accessory buildings, and hence I'm supportive of this request. In terms of comments received from the county engineer, he's indicated no comment. Same with CN, same with our drainage superintendent. After the fact, I did get some comments from the Upper Thames River Conservation Authority where they've expressed no objection. Same from our Director of Public Works, he has no concerns. From our Chief Building Official, he's noted that they will need to verify that the accessory building will not be used for any uses other than residential, and that the addition will need to be set back from the septic system on the property and should be shown on the site plan. From the public, to date, no responses have been received from the public. So it's my recommendation, Your Worship, that the application be approved, subject to the reasons outlined in my report. I'm here for any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any questions regarding this report, Council? Okay, so is the applicant here, Alan?
Yes, Your Worship. John Vanderhoven is coming in.
Thank you.
What did you do?
I don't know.
What did you do?
Hello?
Hello, Mr. Vanderhoven. We can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, perfect.
We're new to this.
We can hear you, so that's good. You're not muted. So anytime, if you have any additional information you'd like to provide, welcome to go ahead.
Not really. Thank you very much for taking time to hear us. But no, Mark, I think kind of summed it all up. I have some classic cars. I have a golf cart. I got tractor and backhoe and front loader and all this pool equipment and stuff. We just don't have any room. So the next stage of our plan was to do this. So after that is done, we'll get on to our next stage of our plan. So.
Okay, thank you. Sounds like there is a need for that garage by the sounds of it. So now I'm going to ask, Council, do you have any questions regarding that? Nope, seeing none. Do we have any other members from the public in attendance who wish to provide comments, Alan?
No, Your Worship.
Thank you. So overall, any committee members have any questions regarding this application? Okay, so I'm going to ask the committee to make their decision on the application by resolution. Deputy Mayor Elliott? So moved, seconded by Councillor Heeman. All in favor? So carried. And I'm just going to advise that the written notice of the decision will be forwarded to designated parties and that there's a 20-day appeal period. You may request to be notified of the decision by emailing the clerk. At this time, I'm going to ask for a resolution to adjourn in order to reconvene as a public meeting under the Planning Act. Deputy Mayor Elliott, seconded by Councillor Hunter. All in favor? So now we have the public meeting consent application B12/21. The purpose of this public meeting is to consider an application for consent as submitted by the applicant, which is B and L Nolan Holdings, the agent being Monteith Brown Planning Consultants, care of J. McGuffin, property location 2387 Westchester Bourne. So Mr. Bancroft, could you provide an overview of the applications, comments received, and planning recommendation?
Yes, Your Worship, thank you. So the purpose of this consent is to sever a vacant parcel of land to enlarge a neighboring property known municipally as 2309 Westchester Bourne to facilitate the expansion of an existing contracting business. The subject property, it's 16.6 hectares in size, and it's located on the west side of Westchester Bourne and north of Bradley Avenue. Known municipally as 2387 Westchester Bourne. These lands are vacant and they're used for the cultivation of field crops. These lands are owned by B&L Nolan Holdings, which is a sister company of Royal Fence. So to expand Royal Fence's operation, they are proposing to sever a vacant northerly portion of the subject lands, having an area of 3.4 hectares which would be added to the current site of Royal Fence's contracting operation. The balance of the property, the lands to be retained, they would have an area of approximately 13 hectares, and they would continue to be used for farming purposes. So if approved, the Royal Fence operation would increase in size from 4 hectares to 7.4 hectares. I should also add that the lands to be conveyed, they are designated agricultural special policy area 2, and they're also zoned a site-specific highway commercial zone, HC-7, which permits the contracting use. This zoning is also consistent with the adjacent Royal Fence operation, and the balance of the property, they are designated agricultural and zoned site-specific agricultural A-55 to recognize the deficient lot area of the lands. Council may recall that this consent application was originally heard back in June, on June 22nd of 2020, under application B8/20. That approval has since lapsed as conditions of consent were not satisfied within a year as required by the legislation. So in essence, this current proposal is simply a reapplication of the original consent. I've conducted my analysis, Your Worship, and I'm satisfied with the policy direction offered by the provincial policy statement, the county official plan, and the Thames Centre official plan in allowing consents involving minor boundary adjustments, provided that a non-viable farm parcel is not created and that we don't have any adverse impacts on agricultural operations. Also, one of the criteria is that the conveyance should require that the lands being severed be merged in the same name and title as the lands to which they're being added. So that's certainly capable of being demonstrated as a condition of this approval. So, Your Worship, in all, again, I'm satisfied that all of these tests have been met or capable of being met through conditions of consent. In terms of comments received from an agency standpoint, from the county engineer, no concern. Also, after the fact, I received comments from Hydro One and the Upper Thames River Conservation Authority. They have no concerns or objections. Our drainage superintendent has noted that 2 drainage reassessments will be required. Our chief building official has no concern. Also, after the fact, our public works director has noted that the well that supplied potable water for the former dwelling located on the subject lands at 2387 Westchester Bourne, that it be decommissioned and that the well decommissioning record be forwarded to the municipality. So it's my recommendation, Your Worship, that this application be approved, subject to the 5 conditions that are noted in my report, along with an additional condition as requested by the Director of Public Works, that the owner retain a qualified person to decommission the well, and a copy of that decommissioning record be forwarded to the municipality, and also subject to the reasons outlined in my report. I'm here to answer any questions, Your Worship, should there be any. Thank you.
Thank you. Council, any questions regarding this information so far? Seeing none. Alan, we have the agent with us today.
Yes, Your Worship, we have the applicant Sean Nolan and agent Hannah Shirtliff.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Your Worship, staff, members of council and staff. My name is Hannah Shirtliff, and I'm a planner with Monteith Brown Planning Consultants, here representing our client, Sean Nolan of Royal Fence and BNL Nolan Holdings. We'd like to thank staff for the opportunity to review the report in advance of the public meeting. We're in agreement with staff's recommendations. Just as a note, the previous consent application lapsed due to issues associated with scheduling and statutory timelines regarding the required approval of the zoning bylaw amendment for the severed lands to be rezoned to HC-7. The zoning bylaw amendment was approved, but the appeal period had not yet ended at the time that the consent was scheduled to lapse, hence the resubmission. I'm also available to answer any of council's questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Hannah. Council, any questions regarding any additional information? Oh, okay. Do we have any members from the public in attendance?
No, your worship.
Thank you. Generally speaking, council members, any comments, questions regarding this? I think it's pretty familiar territory. We've covered it once before. All right, thank you, Hannah. And we're going to advise now that the public meeting portion for this application has been completed. And I'm going to ask council to make their decision on the application by resolution, considering all comments received. So looking for a mover, Councillor Heeman, seconded by Deputy Mayor Elliott. All in favor? So carried. I advise you that a written notice of the decision will be forwarded to designated parties, and there's a 20-day appeal period from the date of notice of decision. You may request to be notified of the decision by emailing the clerk. Now I'm going to ask for a resolution to adjourn the public meeting and council reconvene its regular meeting in order to continue with the deliberations. Deputy Mayor Elliott, seconded by Councillor Hunter. All in favor? And so moved. So now we're moving on to the reports. Actually, no, we're going to the consent agenda. So items listed on the consent agenda are considered routine and may require discussion, but no action on the part of council. Consent items are received for information in one motion. Council members may request that one or more item be removed for further action. Are there any requests to have any of these removed? No.
For the consent agenda?
Yeah. So there's the regular council minutes. There's the OFA 2021 regional meeting, which I think was September 2nd. The Town of St. Mary's notice of submission of environmental assessment for their landfill. The Middlesex County European Gypsy Moth report and the Upper Thames Conservation Authority watershed review normal water condition.
If it's possible for 8.4, I'm just curious about the Gypsy Moth report.
Oh, so
Any additional context or having, I'm assuming this has gone through council already?
it was a report that the County of Middlesex received at their last council meeting, which is why I think it's been allowed to been shared with us. Not anything new to report on that. The only thing I read today was something separate from that, was that now is the time if you want to go out and get the eggs off trees, it's the time to do it now because, you know, they do mass up in thousands and it's a great time to get after them. So, but Tom, did you want to pull this out and discuss it separately?
If possible.
Okay, so I'm looking for 8.1, 8.2, 8.3, 8.5 to receive. Councillor Hunter, seconded by Deputy Mayor Elliott. All in favor? Yep, okay. Sorry, I missed the minutes, so we have to approve those as well. So adding on to that, it was and all in favor? Okay, and now so 8.4 Middlesex County open for discussion.
I just noted that it
Oh.
recommends the.
You need your mic.
Yeah, I just noted that it recommends the passive strategy and if, which is no financial action. And then I've observed that other regional municipalities are taking some action and it seems to be quite serious given the long-term numbers that they presented and the impact on forest land. So I'm just curious whether there is any action being taken, although if not financial, in terms of harmonizing with higher levels of government and prioritizing some of those interventions that are less invasive.
Deputy Mayor Elliott.
Yes, through your worship. So there's a pretty extensive, I think it's 23 pages long report that Mark Brown, our forestry department, had given to county council when this was presented to us last month. And it was a pretty extensive discussion that we had at county council in regards to this. And I think the way moving forward is just to, Mark will continue to monitor our county forests and our county property in regards to this, and that we would move forward with developing the good neighbor policy, which I know when Mayor Warwick and I did our bus trip to Grand Bend, and we spoke with the mayor of Lambton Shores at the time. This is something their community had also done, and that with the good neighbor policy, if anybody abutting any of our properties wanted to spray, normally when you spray, there's I forget the exact amount of distance that has to be between the property lines. This would allow them to spray right up into their property lines. And so I think that was a positive feature for county council to develop as well. So we did discuss that, and that was part of the recommendation, as well as that we move forward with that good neighborhood policy. But I think the monitoring was a big part of the discussions that we had at the county, and Mark Brown would continue to work with that.
That answer your questions, Councillor Heeman?
Yeah, thank you for the additional context. And I did read the 23-page report, and I know it's something that it's a big deal. So it's good to keep an eye on these things.
Yeah, and I think, Mr. Brown does a really good job of those reports and has a really clear understanding of what's going on in the county. And with the county forests, it's something that to consider, not so much at our end because our county forests are a little bit smaller, but Skunk's Misery, that way it is of serious concern. So the county is taking it quite seriously. So if there's no more questions regarding the item of 8.4, I'm asking for a mover to accept that receive that for information. Councillor Heeman, seconded by Deputy Mayor Elliott. All in favor? Great, thank you. So now we're going to move on to the reports of the departments. The first one we have is 9.1, and that is the bylaw enforcement complaint policy. And who will be discussing that? All right, so Alan, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. Admin Report C00621 regarding the creation of a proposed bylaw enforcement complaint policy. It's before you for your consideration. We have Aaron Stewardson here for any technical questions regarding this.
Okay, and Mr. Stewardson, any questions, or would you like to just discuss it, or do you feel it's fairly clear? What's your opinion here?
I don't have anything else to add, Your Worship. But if council and yourself have any questions, I'm here.
I think it's a policy that we need. It's been it'll make things a lot easier, a little bit more clear for staff to go ahead and enforce these bylaw infractions, and will help the public understand what's involved exactly to go ahead and move along with a complaint. So yes, I think it was a good report, and I thank you both for bringing it forward. So I have a recommended motion in front of me that report admin C00621 be received as information, and that the bylaw enforcement complaint policy be adopted and added to corporate policies as CPB 1-1.2. So looking for a mover. Councillor Heeman, seconded by Councillor Hunter. All in favor? So carried. And now we're moving on to admin 00721 municipal fireworks bylaw, which seems timely after the wonderful display of fireworks we had on the weekend, and they truly were spectacular. So anybody that saw them will appreciate that. And are you taking this report, Mr. Henry? Yeah, go
I
ahead.
am, Your Worship. Thank you. Good afternoon, Council. I tried to get Alan to take this one because it's got a little bit of rules with it. I didn't want to dissuade the fireworks. I know how much we love them around here. So. Okay, so the keynotes on the policy for admin 00721, or sorry, the bylaw, are the changes to the sale and storage. There's a fine system that has been implemented, and there's some definitions surrounding fireworks that came down from the federal level, just for a little bit more clarity. And the fine structure that is associated with the bylaw now gives us a little bit more of a little bit more teeth in enforcing it, ensuring people stay safe. We know that this year came with a few controversies. The fine, we'll note, is not escalating. It's a standard amount. It doesn't go on your second offense, third offense. Simply, we just do not have the manpower, the people to keep track of all that out there. So if there's any further questions to it, I'm certainly here to help.
Great. And I'm glad we've considered sparklers, because that's another pleasure in life that we don't want to disturb anybody. So we have, council, any questions about this? No. All right. So we have a recommended motion that admin 00721 be received for information, and that bylaw 70/2021 being a bylaw to regulate the display and the discharge of fireworks within the municipality of Thames Centre be approved. Mover? Councillor Hunter, seconded by Deputy Mayor Elliott. All in favor? Great. Now 9.3, we have admin 00821 COVID-19 mandatory vaccination policy. And Mr. Henry, are you taking this one?
I am, Your Worship. Thank you again, Council. Before you is admin 00821, the COVID-19 mandatory vaccination policy. It's not something to be taken lightly. It is, I hope, had your unlimited attention. I should point out a couple things. There is, we know what's happening out there in the world. We know what recommendations have come down from our multiple levels of government and our local municipal health unit, and we are following up on some of those guidelines. There's a bit of a mix on what's happening with our municipal neighbors. Some are just a little bit further behind, and some are taking in a little bit different direction, perhaps. But I should point out in this policy that we're bringing forth, it does not include council members at this point. I was leaving that for you to discuss amongst yourselves to see if that's what you would want added in there if you so elect to adopt the policy and move forward. Any questions, which I'm sure you'll have, I'm certainly here to help.
Okay, comments or questions regarding this policy? Deputy Mayor Elliott?
Yes, so Your Worship, as our CEO Henry said, this isn't something that we should take very lightly. I've been watching closely on what other municipalities are doing and how other areas are moving forward. I know the City of London, next to us, their committee last week approved tightened COVID vaccination rules where it's mandatory vaccinations. There's no testing loophole at all. It's mandatory vaccine that's coming to approval at City Council tomorrow night. And I know that they are working on bringing forward a similar policy for their council members as well. I think, and it's my personal belief, is as we move forward and COVID vaccination and mandatory vaccination in order to attend municipal facilities moves forward. I know I got an email from Dorchester Minor Hockey Association that all spectators, children, everybody needs to be double vaccinated. I think it sets a double standard when we say, you know, the kids going into the arena, 12 and older, need to be vaccinated. Parents and grandparents that want to watch their kids play have to be vaccinated. But a staff member working in the facility doesn't need to be. I think it sets a double standard to that. And I know a lot of the complaints, and not necessarily complaints, but concerns with how COVID has and everything has rolled out has been the inconsistencies. And I truly believe that if we're going to talk the talk, we have to walk the walk. And if we're going to have mandatory vaccines in our facilities, our staff staff members have to be included in that. And I'll go as far as saying as that to show that leadership, that council members should be included in that too, that we have to show that leadership. And if we're going to say this, we have to do it ourselves. And so I'm supportive of moving this forward.
Sir Heeman, did you have a comment?
Yeah, well, I think that doesn't leave much ground left to cover, but no, I do think that this is, I think it's appropriate and it's in line with moves that we're seeing provincially and federally and internationally as well. And I do think that it's important that there is an accounting for human rights concerns, even though, I do think that the science is clear. And someone who's been deathly afraid of needles my entire life, I think that we're at a very good position with this entire vaccine rollout. And so I would support Deputy Mayor Elliott's point on extending this to council. And I think it's one of the few things that allows us to get back to some sort of normalcy.
Councillor Hunter, would you like to comment on this?
No, I just totally agree with the previous two comments that were made, and I just think it's the right thing to do to move forward to get closer to the end of this COVID.
I agree. Like, I think that it's been a long road, and anything we can do to shorten that road is what we should be looking for. And I did say to CEO Henry earlier, said, we come to a curve on the road, we negotiate that and we find another curve. So I think this is our way that we get to a straight road and start driving ahead with this. If we were changing it to add council to this, would that be just an amendment to the motion that's there? Okay. All right. So I just want to make that clear. Are we formally amending that motion to include council?
I'll move the recommendations and add that council members are included in this policy.
And you'll second that? Okay. And before I call the vote, I'd just like to make sure that we understand it's going to be a recorded vote. Okay. Yep. It was Councillor Heeman.
In favor.
In favor.
In favor.
In favor. So carried. Thank you. Okay, now we're moving on to the CS 1221, the Thorndale Lions Community Center, which will be firing into action this month on all cylinders. And it's a motion that something that we're all looking forward to. And I see Mr. McDonald has appeared in front of us. He must be exhausted from the weekend, but here he is. And the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Council. Through you, Your Worship. You have before you report number CS-012-21 for your consideration. The purpose of this report is to provide Council with the final costs incurred for the design and build of the Thorndale Lions Community Center. The original quoted cost from MCI Design Build Corporation for this project was $2,566,000 net of HST credits. During the construction process, there were a significant number of change orders, the majority of which were involved with unanticipated site work as the direct result of the fire of the previous building. The net cost of all change orders and additional expenses totaled $773,436 net of HST credits. The total budget for this community center project was $3,050,000, comprised of $2.8 million for the design build, plus $250,000 for ground redevelopment to help with the cost of site work. The cost of the project to date is $3,339,436. Costs to date are over budget as a result by $289,436 as a direct result of the unanticipated cost attributable to the fire that occurred on February 24th, 2020. The project was originally included in the 2019 budget to be funded from a combination of development charges, municipal debt, and fundraising or donations. While funding allocations will not be finalized until the completion of the 2021 year-end audit and 2021 update to the development charges bylaw, debt should not be required, given the provision of development charges, pledges, pending estate distribution, and receipt of insurance proceeds, fundraising, and generous donations. And I'm happy to answer any questions you may have at this time.
Thank you for that. It's never fun going over, but I think when you have a fire to deal with and the resulting contaminations of the ground, that's an added expense. And then who knew we'd have to start putting glass in for COVID everywhere as well. So I think there's quite a few fairly change orders that aren't just because somebody didn't like the color of the floor. So council, any questions or comments regarding this overage?
Yeah, I just think it's good to have a transparent accounting of where we're at. And I do think that there's also detail there on the significant additional revenue that is being finalized. And I do think it's good when you have tremendous community support behind a project like this, because it allows us to be flexible in our attainment of goals. So I do think that we're still in very good financial shape, and there's some extras in that building aside from unintended discoveries post the fire. So I think that we're in very good shape, and I don't think that this is outside of what we had discussed or expected.
Any other questions, comments? I guess at the end of the year, we'll find out exactly what we're looking at, but I will say that the continued community support for this project has been inspiring, and I think really makes a difference on the bottom line when we get to that time. So again, thanks for everybody that's gone ahead of us and donated to help cushion the blow of losing that community center a little bit earlier than we had planned to lose it. So great. So we have report CS 1221 for information, and we're looking for a mover to accept that. Councillor Hunter, and seconded by Deputy Mayor Elliott. All in favor? Thank you. Okay, and now we have the mayor's report, and I'm sad to say it's been a long time since we've had a meeting, so there's some details I have to go over. Since our last council meeting in August, I've kept busy, and it seems like there are more events to attend each week. August 11th, I attended the Kettle Creek Conservation Authority meeting. And August 15th, I attended the top aggregate producing municipalities in Ontario, where the main discussion is regarding lobbying for more payment to municipalities from their gravel pit owners. And there's quite a lot of discussion about that because not so much Thames Centre, but a lot of these smaller municipalities are pretty well gravel pits everywhere, and their roads, they just can't afford to keep the roads up to what they're going. So that seems to be the driving force there. August 16th, 17th, 18th, I attended the Association of the Municipalities of Ontario, along with Deputy Mayor Elliott and Councillor Hunter. The Monday, I did a delegation with the Middlesex Council Women's Caucus, 2 delegations. First with Donna Skelly, the Assistant for Ministry of Economic Development and Job Creation, and then with Jane McKenna, the Assistant Minister for Children and Women's Issues. And those were great discussions that we had with both of them. Again, on Monday, I represented, along with Thames Centre staff and other municipalities, a delegation with OMAFRA regarding both CN and CPR status on drainage assessments. And that's still an ongoing discussion. On behalf of SCORE, so the South Central Ontario Regional Economic Development, I presented to PA DPAC and MOND with the concerns we had with the Ministry of Labour Skills and Development. That was in the morning. At 11 o'clock, I chatted to MP Stephen Lecce regarding the divide between municipalities and school boards and how we can work better together. And also reminded him about our early years center that we're still awaiting on, which I'm sure he was glad to hear about. At 12 o'clock, I met with Minister Mulroney and the Ministry of Transportation regarding a number of issues, foremost being community transit, short line rail, and some other things that SCORE has on their front burner. On Tuesday, August 17th, I had a delegation with the Ministry of Infrastructure and finished up with OMAFRA, where Mayor Muller and I had a great conversation with the newly appointed Minister Thompson. The Women's Caucus was also honored to be mentioned by Her Honor Elizabeth Dodswell during her presentation in the conference. August 13th and September 1st, I attended a special events meeting where we really put Bridgefest together in a hurry and made provisions that if we couldn't go ahead, it would be easily canceled, but we were very fortunate and were able to go ahead with that. On Thursday, September 2nd, I represented the County of Middlesex at the Elgin Wardens Golf Tournament. Luckily, there were better golfers than me representing, and Thames Centre was also well represented at our neighbors' county event. September 7th, I had 5 separate interviews with the CBC radio, ranging from Windsor to Thunder Bay, and the topic being community transportation. September 10th started off with a meeting of the Emergency Control Group, and then at 2 p.m. it was my pleasure to bring greetings to the 30th anniversary of the Lions Senior Center, and that was a wonderful celebration. And again, a shout out to Karen Grass for her passion and her great skills with that community center, and that was something we discussed when I brought the opening remarks, was how well she kept that program going during the shutdown, and how well those seniors were able to communicate to each other and learned a lot of new skills, whether they wanted to or not. They were Zooming all over the place. So September 11th, a good time was had by everyone at Bridgefest. It ran from 2 to 8 p.m. It was a wonderful day that featured music on the new stage. It was great to see the new stage in use on the Friday and the Saturday. Over 70 vendors spread between the bridge and Hamilton Road. It was a fantastic day that ended with an amazing firework display sponsored by the Dorchester Lions and Thames Centre. Many thanks to the Thames Centre Special Events Committee who kept the faith and made this event possible. On September 11th and 12th, Thames Centre was also honored to host the Steel Timber Sports Canadian Championships. And this will be televised on TSN later in October. So tune in and you can see all the goings on that happened there. Due to COVID, it was invitation only, but we're hoping that they'll consider to come back sometime and be able to cheer them on all in public. And I must say the Fighting Center was a wonderful venue for that, and it worked out very well. And we received lots of compliments on it. So that concludes that report. Unfinished business, I see none. Notice of motion, I see 12.1, Deputy Mayor Elliott. You do have a notice of motion ahead?
Yes, through you, your motion, your worship. I spoke with Councillor Heeman, and as members of the council members from the Committee for Accessibility and Inclusivity, we thought that it was important to bring this motion forward. So our motion is from the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, whereas the Truth and Reconciliation, I can't talk today. Truth and Reconciliation Commission released its final report on June 2nd, 2015, which included 94 calls to action to address the legacy of residential schools and advance the process of Canadian reconciliation. And whereas the recent discoveries of remains in unmarked graves across Canada have led to increased calls for all levels of government to address the recommendations in the TRC's call to action, and whereas all Canadians and all orders of government have a role to play in reconciliation, and whereas recommendation number 80 of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission called for the federal government in collaboration with Aboriginal peoples to establish as a statutory holiday a National Day for Truth and Reconciliation to ensure that public commemoration of the history and legacy of residential schools remains a vital component of the reconciliation process. And whereas the federal government has announced September 30th, 2021 as the first National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, National Orange Shirt Day, and a statutory holiday, and therefore be resolved that the Council of the Municipality of Thames Centre does hereby commit to recognizing September 30th, 2021 as the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, National Orange Shirt Day, by sharing these stories of residential school survivors, their families, and their communities. And I will put that motion on the floor.
Okay, thank you. Discussion about that motion. Councillor Heeman?
Yeah, I think that this is an important motion, and it's in line with, I think, larger discussions that are going on. And I think it's a very small thing that we can do to help promote awareness and understanding. And, intergenerational trauma is something that's very, very hard to think about. And but I think it's something that we can understand and work to eliminate. But it requires us to put that thought forward. So I would support this motion on that basis.
Okay. Any other discussion before? No? Okay. I do think, by recognizing something and looking at it closely and studying it is the way that we can move through this. I think it's a small thing that we can do. And I think the tide is there. The federal government's recognized it. We see other municipalities starting to recognize it as well. And also we know that AMO, our association, is pushing everyone to go ahead and do that. So it's not a matter of if, it's just when. And I think by taking this stance now is looking forward and moving on. So I take it, Deputy Mayor Elliott, you're making the motion. Did you want to second that, Councillor Heeman? Okay. All right. So I'm going to call the vote. All in favor? Great. Thank you. New business, seeing none. Closed session. Haven't had a closed session for a long time. Sure, there'll be something coming along. So now we have bylaws. We have the recommended motion that bylaws 70/2021 through 72/2021 be adopted as presented. Councillor, is there any bylaws you want pulled out of there? Or are you comfortable going with all those three bylaws as presented? Okay, so looking for a mover. Councillor Hunter, seconded by Councillor Heeman. All in favor? Our next meeting is Monday, September 27th at 2021 at 5 p.m. And now I'm looking for a motion to adjourn, and that's Councillor Hunter. And don't need, seconder, Deputy Mayor Elliott. I'm sure we're all in favor. So the meeting is concluded at 2:20.